with the outbreak of the First World War, the country was gripped by spy mania. This was justified because soon after the outbreak of war, a number of German spies were arrested, and subsequently a number of those were executed. They were shot by firing squad in the Tower of London. In Folkestone itself, the spy mania was particularly acute. The reason for this was obvious to see. Folkestone was the front line of the country. We had many British and Commonwealth troops come to Folkestone for their journey across the Channel to the Western Front, and it would have been a ripe place for German spies to glean information. The people of Folkestone, encouraged by the government poster propaganda campaign against the threat of German spies, were quick to embrace spy mania. Many of them joined the ranks of the Special Constabulary, and it was their job to keep an eye on strangers as well as the good folk of Folkestone. Some of the Special Constables took their duties to extreme, and there are examples. John Jones, a councillor in Folkestone during the war, mentions one of his good friends, a trade unionist, who was a special constable, who one night came round to Mr. Jones's home and told him to turn the lights out. And he was very officious about it. Mr. Jones protested that the lights weren't on, and they went to investigate, finding that in fact it was the moon reflecting in his window. During the first few weeks of the war, many German reservists who were living in Britain tried to make the journey back to Germany to join the German army. Many of them came to Folkestone for the journey across the Channel, and they were arrested in Folkestone. 235 of them, in fact, were arrested and marched off into internment for the rest of the war. Foreign aliens, particularly Germans and Austrians, were required to register. And in Folkestone alone, during the first month of the war, 1,000 German aliens, in fact, registered with the local police. However, not all of them did, and those who didn't fell foul of the law. In August of 1914, there were 2 German waiters hauled up before the local magistrates' court for failing to register. Their defence was that many others hadn't done so either. That cut no ice with the magistrates, and they were sentenced to 3 months' hard labour. In the same court, 2 German ladies were also brought to book. Their defence was that they thought it only applied to men, and in any case, they were not enemies. They were let off with a fine of 2 and 6pence. So amongst all this spy mania, which was taking place in Folkestone, we then discover the fact that, unbeknown to the people of Folkestone, there was in fact a hotbed of espionage taking place within the town. During the first few weeks of the war, there was established in Folkestone a bureau. The bureau consisted of intelligence officers from Britain, France and Belgium. The British Intelligence Bureau was headed by Major Cecil Cameron, and his job it was to recruit people who could become spies for Britain. Now this was possible because through Folkestone were passing many hundreds, thousands in fact, refugees from France and in particular from Belgium as the Germans invaded that country. And it was thought that amongst these there may be a few who could be asked and then trained to go back as agents. In August 1914, Louise de Bettini arrived in Folkestone as a refugee, and it was quickly realised that she was something special, and she was referred to Major Cameron. She was put up in a local hotel, quite possibly the Grand, and that evening Major Cameron visited her. Louise was a 34-year-old lady from a French noble family. She was fluent in English, French and German, and she quickly agreed that she would become a spy for Britain. And she was trained in the arts of spying at a local training school. Secret writing, sewing messages in the hems of skirts and engraving messages on the lenses of spectacles. These were fairly sophisticated techniques. Once her training was complete, Louise returned to Belgium, and her first couple of missions led to the establishment of a network of spies in Belgium, whose information was passed back to Major Cameron in Folkestone. One of the results of this information was that it was discovered that the German Kaiser would be visiting Lille in France on a particular day, and British bombers were sent to bomb the Kaiser's train, and they very nearly got him. It was more by luck than judgment that the Kaiser escaped. Then in 1915, Louise was sent on another mission, this time to Tournai. With her, she had a secret message contained on thin paper, wrapped up inside her signet ring. By now, the Germans were becoming much more aware of the presence of spies. And when Louise was presented to a checkpoint, she realised that the search about to be undertaken was by no means going to be cursory. What she did was try to pop the message in her mouth and to swallow it, but this was seen by a German soldier. She was arrested and tried, and she was convicted and sentenced to death by firing squad. In fact, that sentence was commuted to one of imprisonment, and she languished in prison then until September 1918, when she died of tuberculosis. Another lady who came to Folkestone and was spoken to by the intelligence services was Margarita Zell. She was on her way out of the country, in fact, and wanted to embark upon a ferry. She was examined by Captain Stephen Dillon, who said that he was not particularly impressed with her, dressed as she was in her raccoon fur coat. She said that she was going to visit her Dutch colonel lover. The fact of the matter is, Captain Dillon didn't have any reasons to detain her, and she was allowed to continue on her journey. In due course, Margarita Zell was arrested by the French for spying, and she was convicted. She is known to history as Mata Hari, and her ability to talk her way out of trouble, as she had with Captain Dillon in Folkestone, did not work with the French, and she was sentenced to death, and she was executed by firing squad. Many spies were recruited in Folkestone. Some 2,000 Belgian agents were recruited and sent back to behind the lines in Belgium to spy for Britain. And in fact, it was during those years of the First World War in Folkestone that we can trace the origins of today's intelligence services, both MI5 and MI6. Even today, nearly 100 years after the war, finding out detailed information about those times remains difficult.